This is the story of Enchanted. You can read along with me in your book. You will know it is time to turn the page when you hear this sound. Let's begin now. Once upon a time, in the magical kingdom of Andalasia, there lived a beautiful girl named Giselle. She often dreamed of finding the one she loved and having true love's kiss. Giselle knew true love's kiss was the most powerful thing in the world. One day, as Giselle and her best friend Pip sat in her treehouse deep in the forest, she told him about one such dream.
Oh, Pip, it was such a lovely dream. We were holding hands and dancing and...
Giselle began to sing. Her beautiful voice floated through the entire forest, and all the animals began to gather at the treehouse. Nearby, handsome Prince Edward and his servant Nathaniel had just captured a troll when they heard Giselle singing. Prince Edward leapt onto his horse.
I must find the maiden that belongs to that sweet voice.
But Nathaniel knew Edward's stepmother, evil Queen Nerissa, did not want him to marry, so he freed the troll. It smashed Giselle's treehouse and was about to grab and eat her when Prince Edward saved her. He was sure he'd found his true love.
We shall be married in the morning.
The next morning, Giselle arrived at the castle dressed in a beautiful wedding gown. As Giselle walked through the royal courtyard, Queen Nerissa appeared, disguised as an old hag. She led Giselle to the edge of a wishing well.
Just close your eyes, my darling, and make your wish.
With a wicked laugh, she shoved Giselle into the well. Pip saw Giselle fall and ran to get Prince Edward. But Giselle was gone. Queen Nerissa had sent her where there were no happily ever afters. Down and down, Giselle tumbled through the shimmering clouds of magical dust that turned her into a real woman. She landed in a small, dark place. Pushing aside a heavy metal cover, Giselle crawled out and gasped. Huge buildings surrounded her. Thousands of lights blinked and flashed, and the noise was deafening. She was in the middle of Times Square, in New York City. Lost and frightened, Giselle wandered the streets, asking everyone she met for help.
I was wondering if one of you kind people might direct me to the castle.
It began to rain. Wet, cold, hungry, and miserable, Giselle walked on and on. Suddenly, she saw a castle gleaming high above her. It was just a picture on a billboard, but Giselle thought it was real. She climbed up the billboard ladder and pounded on the sign.
Hello, please open the door.
On the street below, a little girl named Morgan and her father, Robert, saw Giselle. Morgan ran toward her.
Daddy, why is there a princess on the castle billboard?
Just then, Giselle slipped, and Robert ran toward her.
Doctor, Daddy!
Giselle landed in Robert's arms.
Is this a big habit of yours, falling off stuff?
Giselle blinked her eyes.
Well, usually someone catches me.
Robert thought Giselle was very strange, but he had a kind heart, and she needed help. So he invited her to his and Morgan's apartment. Giselle was sure Prince Edward would come soon to rescue her, and she was right. For early the next morning, Prince Edward and Pip blasted from the manhole. Prince Edward dashed down the crowded streets, waving his sword.
Come along, Pip.
But Pip realized something terrible. He couldn't talk in this world. When she awoke and saw Robert's messy apartment, Giselle put her head out the window and began to sing. Soon, rats, pigeons, and cockroaches streamed inside. Giselle smiled at them and clapped her hands.
All right, everyone. Let's tidy things up.
Soon the place was spotless, but Robert was horrified. His home was full of little animals. Then, to make matters worse, Robert's girlfriend Nancy showed up. When she saw Giselle, she was furious. Robert didn't know how to make up with Nancy, but Giselle did.
You should sing to her.
In Andalasia, Queen Nerissa watched everything in a magical waterfall. When she saw Prince Edward searching for Giselle, Nerissa was furious. Boldly, Nathaniel leapt into the wishing well.
Never fear, my queen. I will stop him!
Moments later, the manhole cover popped off and Nathaniel wriggled out. Just then, Prince Edward and Pip rode by on top of a bus. Edward was plunging the sword into its roof.
The steel beast is dead, peasants. I set you all free.
Quickly, Nathaniel pulled Edward away from the angry bus driver. Nathaniel took Prince Edward and Pip to a restaurant and sneaked into the kitchen to talk to Queen Nerissa. Her reflection appeared in a pot of soup, and she was boiling mad. She sent Nathaniel 3 poisoned apples to kill Giselle.
One small bite to drag her down into a deep and troubled sleep. And when the hands of the clock strike 12, that precious little pretender to my throne will be gone.
Pip had been spying and overheard everything. Giselle was in danger. Pip tried to tell Prince Edward, but without his voice, he couldn't make him understand. Nathaniel hurried out and tracked down Robert and Giselle in Central Park. Pretending to be a hot dog vendor, he gave Giselle a poisoned caramel apple. But she didn't eat it. She was too busy talking to Robert about love. She thought he had left out something important.
You forgot about happily ever after.
Robert shrugged.
Forget about happily ever after. It doesn't exist.
Giselle flung up her hands.
Well, of course it does. Oh!
The poisoned apple flew out of her hand and safely splattered far away. Giselle couldn't believe Robert's romance with Nancy was so complicated.
It doesn't have to be. Not if she knows how much you really love her.
A steel band was playing nearby, and Giselle began to sing about how to tell someone you love them. Soon a crowd of people began to gather and listen, and before long they were all so enchanted by her lovely song that they joined in. Giselle picked a bouquet and called 2 doves.
Take these to Nancy, please.
Robert thought Giselle was crazy.
They're birds. They don't know where she lives.
Giselle danced and sang through the park. She twirled past a bandstand and waltzed around a lake. She danced past picnickers and joggers, old couples and young couples, kids and business people with briefcases. And everywhere she went, delighted people followed her, singing and dancing along at her side. Just as Giselle's song ended, Robert's phone rang. It was Nancy, thanking him for the beautiful flowers and tickets to a ball. Robert was stunned, but Giselle was not surprised at all. That night, Nathaniel left Prince Edward at the old hotel they were staying in and snuck into a restaurant where Morgan, Robert, and Giselle were dining. Dressed as a waiter, he served Giselle a drink made from a poisoned apple. As Giselle lifted the glass to her lips, Pip leapt from his hiding place, knocked the drink to the floor, and began to pantomime frantically. Robert and the other diners thought Pip was attacking Giselle, but she understood him.
Edward is here!
Furiously, Nathaniel grabbed Pip and flung him toward the pizza oven. But luckily, Pip fell into an empty bottle on the shelf instead. At the same time, Prince Edward saw Giselle on television. She was talking to reporters about the wild chipmunk attack, and they gave out the location where they were taping the interview. Rushing off to find her, Prince Edward knocked on hundreds of wrong doors in that neighborhood. At last he came to Robert's. When Robert answered the door, Edward swept into the room.
Your wait is over, my love. Your Edward is here.
He twirled Giselle around the room, scattering knickknacks everywhere. But Giselle wasn't ready to return to Andalasia. She enjoyed spending time with her new friends Morgan and Robert, and would miss them. Also, she wanted to go to the costume ball first.
There's dancing and music.
Edward agreed, if Giselle promised to return home afterward. Meanwhile, in the Italian restaurant, Queen Nerissa was yelling at Nathaniel from the bottom of a glass.
I'm coming there, and I will kill the little wretch myself!
Her screams shattered glasses and freed Pip from the bottle he was trapped in. But Nathaniel quickly grabbed him. Pip was a captive. Again. The costume ball was that night, and Giselle had nothing to wear. She rushed to ask Morgan for help.
I don't even know where to find a fairy godmother at this late hour.
Morgan held up her dad's credit card.
I have something better than a fairy godmother. Daddy says it's only for emergencies. This is definitely an emergency.